right in because every minute counts. Hunglee is such a famous person. I've just looked at his event that he's having on Friday at 3:00 South African time. And I was excited to save my spot again, along with the 267 other people. But we're really excited to have Hung with us today for, I think, the most popular topic of the century, which is AI. And we know that AI actually started its business in the 1900s. And I know that from my uncle who went into IT, which he might regret because he was in the startup band of Pink Floyd. But anyway, he had a successful career in IT as he watched Pink Floyd become more and more famous. But we're really excited, Hung, because you know so much about AI and you know so much about the world of recruitment. I feel like I don't even really have to introduce Hung, but Hung is the curator of Recruiting Brain Food, which I'm sure many of you know. And being a curator, he actually manually curates that content, which is quite ironic since we're talking about AI today. And he has been in the industry for many years. So we're really excited to learn from him in terms of what he's seen in terms of changes in the recruitment industry and what trends he sees shaping the future. And I think a really interesting question is, what role does AI play in that? And what AI tools should we be using if we want to be successful in the world of recruitment? And which AI tools should we maybe not be using? Or perhaps how should we not be using them? Because according to one of his recent posts, one of my favorite topics of trust came up. And I think that that has such an impact in this industry. So welcome once again. For those of you who join us regularly, you know we have this virtual masterclass once a month. And Jennifer and I actually started it during lockdown, right at the beginning. And she got very busy with her MBA. And so she got busier and busier with that. And I continued, which I'm really excited about. And every month we talk about topics that relate to interviews and that relate to recruitment. And it's really just to give back to the recruitment industry. I've been in it for over 25 years and love it. And I'll share links with you. So if you want to come to future masterclasses, you can just follow those links. So Hung, I'm going to hand over to you. Please share with us a little bit more about what you do as the curator of Recruiting Brain Food. And tell us a little bit about what you've seen in the recruitment industry, where you've seen it come from and where you see it going.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Real pleasure for me to be speaking with people from South Africa again, one of my favorite countries. It was a highlight of the year so far for me to come and visit at least some of you earlier this year. So it was great to do that. And yeah, for the people who don't know, basically, I curate a newsletter. I write a newsletter every week. I do a podcast, webinar. And I guess I see my role very much as just trying to connect as many people as possible to the relevant conversations of the day. And as you mentioned, Jane, you know, what's happened over the last 6 months or so in our industry is that AI has simply been the dominant topic, particularly since ChatGPT was released in late last year, December last year. So it's actually super recent, but we've seen this tremendous wave of enthusiasm, wave of adoption. We've seen huge organizations, the biggest companies on the planet, really panic and start rolling out their own competitor versions because they've seen what this company can do. I want this to be very much an interactive session, folks. I know everyone has to go on mute because otherwise it would be a complete cacophony. But please make sure that, you know, you're on the chat, and we're with someone. I think Jennifer's on there trying to pick that stuff up. So we're going to deal with questions a little bit later down the track. Let me kind of just lay out, firstly, a few things that may be worth people knowing, because one of the things that's true about this wave of technology is that no matter sort of how fluent you are or not with it, we all feel a little bit behind. You know, if you're looking at AI today and you're thinking, oh crap, everyone's ahead of me, guess what? Everyone feels the same. No one is on top of it. I'm not on top of it. I actually gave up trying to be on top of it a couple of months or so ago because it didn't seem possible to keep track of what was going on. And I think it's already at that point where I don't think anybody is at a comfort level with generative AI. So that's the first thing to know. So today's session is not going to make you more comfortable with AI. So there's an expectation setter for you. But I think that's just going to be the persistent feeling we all have. I mean, if you've tried to use any of these technologies, and of course, I would urge you to give it a go if you haven't. The emotional journey we all have seems to be very similar. You come to it firstly with a bit of skepticism because everyone's been raving about this. So what is it all about? You're an adult, so of course you doubt that. Then you play around with it and immediately you're shocked because you think, I did not expect it to produce this output. And then you try it again, and then you're a bit scared because you think, what the heck is going on here? This should not be able to produce this output. And that emotional journey from skepticism to enthusiasm to fear is what everyone feels whenever we're interacting with this new class of technologies. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we feel this way, and it's important, I think, we can just lay some of the bedrock so that we just get a little bit more solid foundation when we start thinking and using these technologies. So everyone's heard of the acronym GPT by now, but those kind of terms it's worth us understanding what it means, because that can really help us understand how and why these technologies, this class of technologies, is different, and help us get a handle of it. So G stands for generative, of course, and generative is actually a really important point. Because if you think about what existed before GPTs, we were only able to retrieve information and not have the AI generate it for us. So sometimes we can be a bit confused as to the superficial similarities between the chat GPT interface and, let's say, a search engine like Google, for instance, because it's an input box, and we think, okay, here's an input box. Key difference here is that the search engine is going to retrieve information that already exists on the internet. That's what Google does. When you write something into Google, it will produce you a list of blue links, a page of blue links, and each one of those blue links is a web page that already existed before you tried that search. So your action there is to retrieve information back. And sourcing, candidate identification, is an information retrieval process. Where GPTs are different is that you're going to type something into the interface and it will generate you information that didn't exist before you put that input in. It is generative AI. So this is true for whether it's a textual output copy, or whether you're on a tool like Midjourney and you can kind of create an image, or whether you go into a music app and you create some new music, or now a new video, or whatever it might be. Loads of different applications of where it is, but it's generating new information. Now, where does it generate this new information? This is where the P part comes in. It generates the new information because it has been pre-trained. And it's been pre-trained on whatever data set the organization that has produced the software or produced GPT is fed into it. So if we want to use the example of ChatGPT by OpenAI, what they're saying is that they have actually fed this AI most of the internet before 2021. So in other words, textual data in the main. We're talking about trillions of characters, essentially textual characters, and it's fed into, it's been pre-trained so that we as human users don't necessarily need to start from zero and have to train it from scratch. It's already been pre-trained. Pre-trained algorithmically, in the sense someone's written sort of some rules where it can kind of say, right, if these words occur, it means that the output needs to be these words. So that can be algorithmically produced, but with people sort of writing rules on that. But it's also been reinforced by human feedback. So in other words, there's two layers of pre-training. It's been pre-trained by a set of rules that human beings have written for it to follow. And then it's been reinforced. It's called reinforcement learning by human feedback, by a human being saying, yes, that output's right. No, that output isn't. Try again. So it's a lot of manual labor training this AI to do it. And this is why these AIs have basically been cooking in the oven, so to speak, for several years. They haven't just appeared, even though it feels very sudden, but OpenAI have been working on this for years. And there's been millions of man-hours of human beings saying yes, no, maybe to these outputs. So there's the pre-trained element. Now, what does transformer mean? Transformer is actually the kind of the most difficult thing to think about, but it's a technical sort of explanation as to what actually happens when you put an input in. So you type in a bunch of text. What the AI is going to do is translate that text into numerical data, basically, applies codes to it, meaning it transforms it into some numbers. And once those numbers have been, once it's been translated into numbers, it will recombine them and then output it again with a bunch of text. So there's the transformer aspect of it. And that's what GPT stands for, generative pre-trained transformer. This is the most of the tools that are causing sort of a sensation these days are GPTs. This is the mechanism and the innovation that they've discovered is this is how we're going to try and do it. And AI obviously existed in some form before this, but when we're talking about generative AI, this is what we mean talking about this class of technologies. Anyway. How can this be used? I think there are some obvious use cases for recruiters, right? And if you're, let's say, an operating recruiter and you're looking for candidates or you're looking for clients and what have you, the good news is that this class of technologies can really help you get more efficient with that. So the first example I would say is that it's particularly good at doing the research part of your work as a source of candidates. So imagine, I mean, you don't think you have to imagine too hard, but there'll be scenarios where a customer will give you a requirement or a hiring manager say, hey, listen, I need you to recruit for this. Maybe a new job you've never recruited for with a bunch of skills you didn't know about. Okay, you can take the resume of someone who kind of does this job. Maybe it's an existing colleague, maybe it's the guy who just left or whatever it is. You can feed it into ChatGPT and say, hey, listen, I need you to break down this job and understand, sort of find other competitor organizations that might have this type of skill set. And it might be able to do a very quick market map for you in terms of other sorts of companies that have that are likely to employ this type of person. So for instance, let's say you're looking for a software engineer that has a really good understanding of Kubernetes, let's say. Okay, so you could say, okay, ChatGPT, can you identify for me the top 50 companies in South Africa that have a Kubernetes installation with an IT team bigger than 10 within the vicinity of Cape Town or Johannesburg or wherever you want to locate it. And it might come out, and it should come out with a list of companies to say, yes, these companies have the requirement you need. So the reason why I can do this is because it's been pre-trained on this internet data, right? And it can respond to that to your request. Notice how it's useful exercise sometimes to compare that challenge with putting it into Google, let's say, and compare the outputs you get from ChatGPT. The reality is GPT will be able to generate you a much closer output than you want compared to what Google would do. And this again is why Google is panicking and rushing out products with a speed which they haven't done for the last 10 years, right? Sergey Brin is back coding at Google. The guy should be on a beach somewhere. So panic stations at Google because this has really changed how we think about information. Because actually it turns out generating information that's already been pre-trained is better than retrieving stuff that's kind of being polluted by things like SEO or sponsored type content and what have you. So that's the first use case for recruiters. It could do some market mapping for you and generate you a bunch of companies that you might want to use. Now, you can reuse that information and say, hey, okay, GPT, thank you very much for that output. Can you now create for me a Boolean string extracting each of these companies and output that for me that I can now use on Google? Now, it's not going to create a great Boolean string because remember, it's trained on natural human language, and Boolean is not natural human language. So it's going to come up with something probably is not brilliant, but it could give you a string of and/or statements, which will at least save you some typing. So one of the features of GPTs is that even if the output isn't perfect or isn't exact, it is still more efficient because you can't type as fast as that, right? I had a copywriter friend. Copywriters, of course, most hostile to GPTs because I think they can see the threat of disintermediation. And I didn't want to be nasty to the person because I understand the anxiety. But the reality is I'm going to lean towards using the generation because it saves me typing time. It can output a lot more text than it takes for me to write it. There's no faster way to produce that text than literally asking it to do it for you. So it can help you create a search string, for instance. And when you start interacting with a sort of the technology of this way in a kind of discursive way, you're having a dialogue with it, then it'll start sort of the opportunities and how you use it will start sort of becoming obvious to you once it's able to generate these outputs. Okay, second clear use case, which again people are using today, is obviously copy generation. I'm talking specifically about one type of GPT, which is ChatGPT, and there's obviously the stuff that does music, text, sort of images, whatever. But copy generation, if recruiters are doing any copy generation, probably the GPT can do it more efficiently for you. For instance, you're writing a job advertisement. Okay, great. Usually we would do a copy paste on that, won't we? We'd kind of search on the internet for the job role. We'll find someone else who's written a nice bit of a copy. Great. We'll copy everything that person said, do a quick replace all. Boom, there's our advert. So that's our previous mechanism, which creates identical adverts, very boring. But again, I would say the recommended solution would be to take the ideal prospect candidate, or maybe a load of candidates that you have CVs for, and feed it into the system and say, can you write me an advert that would particularly attract this type of person? Outlining the yes, Kate, I think we're all copy pasta merchants. There's no doubt about that. I think 99% of all job adverts are probably copy pasted from some source, right? However, that's obviously stuff that's like becomes jaded, a copy, and it's not particularly precise. But you can do some sort of novel creation with this technique. So the generation of new adverts, you could say things like, okay, we need to debias this advert, or if you want to say you want to change the tone of it, you can say, please write this in the tone of John Wayne or something. And again, you can use your own creativity to create unique adverts, which you could obviously then go ahead and post. So again, classic use case. Third use case that's obvious is the communication one-to-one with candidates. Again, we've habituated ourselves to use templates for this, haven't we? Where we've got some, canned messages that we could use, or again, templates that we have that we can deploy. Again, highly skilled in-demand candidate has seen that message before, and they could spot it a mile off. Well, okay, you can use generative AI to create yourself a unique message. How about you take the candidate you've identified you want, you pipe in a bunch of profiles of the same candidate, could be a LinkedIn, could be a GitHub profile, maybe a Twitter sort of a feed that person has, and say to GPT, hey, listen, I am a recruiter that's recruiting for this company. Can you write a compelling message for this individual and make sure that person responds back to me? And it will generate you some copy that you probably wouldn't know about. Or the worst case, it would generate something you're not going to use, but has cost you something like 10 seconds to, or let's call it a minute to get to that endpoint. So obvious use cases that operating recruiters today can use for this technology. You expand the aperture out a little bit, and you start looking at images like Midjourney, for instance. Midjourney, by the way, is an image generator. It actually came out before ChatGPT. And again, that's you can create some amazing images that you can use for marketing collateral, for any branding work you want to do. You want to send sort of a message that is not just text, but with image infusion in there. You can use it for that. So yeah, there's almost any kind of media creation that a recruiter currently does, there already is a kind of an ecosystem of applications that we could use for it immediately. Even this conversation that we're having today, right now. So I assume this is being recorded at this point, Jane. That's great. Yeah. You could take this recording and then you could feed it into something called Video IO and say, right, create for me 30 snippets of Hung Lee speaking crap. And it will create like loads of snippets of me making points on this. And then, of course, that could be distributed as marketing collateral, particularly if it wasn't crap. So imagine that you could use, for instance, if you're doing an interview with a hiring manager, as an example. You've met a hiring manager or a customer, you're going to take the requirement via video. You can ask them, hey, listen, we're going to record the video. Are you okay for this, some of this to be used as marketing collateral? Great. You record the video, you feed it into this AI, and it will chop up the video for you with the key zingers that the hiring manager said. That is content you can use directly as a message to the candidate that you want to address, or you could distribute it out wide and say, hey, listen, company Acme Limited is hiring. This is the candidate that's doing this. Sorry, this is the hiring manager that's hiring for a role. So suddenly any media creation that we would do, recruitment marketing techniques, candidate outreach messaging, any of that stuff basically will have some sort of AI tooling that's already available and that you can use. And right now, by the way, because people are still experimenting, most of this is either free or at, consumer level cost, consumer grade cost, should I say. Although it has to be said, US level consumer related cost. So no one's localized any information yet or localized any tools yet. So obviously there's going to be kind of a cost of living type of calculation to make, but lots of it is still free at premium tier, sort of at the freemium tier, and you can use it. You can use it right now. So yeah, lots of practical uses. I think all of you who is kind of watching this at this point, if you went and spent half a day experimenting with some of this technology, you would be ahead of me in terms of knowing what this is about. And then if another bunch of people who weren't in this talk tried tomorrow and spent half a day on it, they would be ahead of you. So this is one of these where we're not in touch with it. No one's in control of it's like a herd of buffalo. We've got opportunity as we're jumping onto it. My encouragement for recruiters is to, make full use of this and become AI enabled, so that firstly, you become more productive. But secondly, you'll be, I think, more confident in the future use of it. The worst thing that you can do is to kind of think you're going to do this tomorrow. And that's one of those tomorrow will never come stories. And you will get kind of left further behind than you should be. I'm reminded a little bit. So I'm old enough to remember recruiting in the pre-internet era. I know I don't look it. I'm in terrific shape. Seriously. But I do remember sort of the internet, sort of recruiting pre-internet. I remember some of the best recruiters at the time. They were like great on the phone, great phone recruiters, phone sources, etc. That was the primary way in which recruiting was done, through being great on the telephone. Internet arrives, email arrives, search engine arrives. Suddenly being able to write great email or being able to do great searches was much more important than being good on the phone. And in fact, these days we have many top performing recruiters that are very average on the phone. Those people who are great on the phone pre-internet and didn't adapt to the internet are no longer doing this job. And I think we're in a very similar situation here, where we have a very big change in terms of how technologies are going to be. It's going to change how we interact with the digital world. And we might be at risk of being that great telephone saucer and holding on to things when the ground shifts beneath us. So I've got confidence that recruiters are very agile and very able to learn. We're very sensitive as well to opportunity. So I think most recruiters will be able to switch attack pretty easily. But yeah, it's like, okay, do it today, do it immediately after this call. If you haven't played with any of these technologies, then after this call, the most important thing you can do is to type in chat.openai into your URL bar and play with it for half an hour.
I love that, Hung, because I think we're at the point now where we've heard so many people saying, I'm a bit afraid to try it. Is this going to replace me as a recruiter? Do I need to be afraid of this? And rather spend more time defending their position of how you don't actually need AI. It's still better to use me, but we're saying here you have to embrace it. And how can the recruiter use AI to be even more successful? So what tools can they use to, be better at what they do? It's not
it's a natural reaction. It's a natural reaction, and it's a natural reaction. It's almost a maturity curve, where your first step is denial, then it's criticism, and then it's like, oh crap, I need to get into it. We're all going to be on that journey, and I believe that all skeptics will eventually convert. And the question that we all have is that you better just speed that up. I mean, there's no point in digging a ditch on this one. We've got to ride this wave and get through it. And there's loads of technologies out there to try. I don't want to be the gatekeeper to tell people, hey, here are the best AIs out there. There's loads of people creating lists online. Twitter is actually a really good source for this, by the way. I'm not sure how popular it is as a tool, but if you did nothing on Twitter other than follow a bunch of AI people, you'll very quickly be able to get some glimpse of the landscape, which looks useful, and that will give you the information you need to have a look, see what's going on.
So, and I hear you, and I hear you don't want to be the gatekeeper or be seen to be, endorsing certain tools above others. But are there any popular ones that spring to mind that you can share as a start for people to tap into?
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about ChatGPT, right? So obviously everyone can use that. It's the product that kind of broke through and gave everyone sort of everyone witnessed what it could perform and do. I would download that. You can get it on your phone, just get it up there, and it's super useful. I mean, even if you decide not to use it for recruitment applications, you could use it as an education tool. You can use it as a thing to learn about various things. It's pretty excellent. I was at a dinner party yesterday, and one of the guests said something really quite cool. And he said, "Look, him and his son, he uses ChatGPT to generate a nighttime story." And
cute.
every single night he speaks to his son and says, okay, what are we gonna sort of say to GPT in order to create the story, and it will create the story for him. And I think the gentleman there, the father's doing that for two reasons. Firstly, because it's generating some interesting stories to talk about, but secondly, I think he's trying to familiarize his child with this way of interacting with the technology. And I think we're all kind of children at this point. Use the thing for fun. Is if you find there's a blocker in your mind as to, this seems like a lot of work, or I'm super busy, I totally get that. I would say the way to adopt it is to stop thinking of it as work, and to get in there and use it for fun. Have a laugh with it, and that will help. Some of the image creation stuff is the most obvious sort of way in which you could have fun with it. I mentioned Midjourney earlier. That's a really cool tool that you can. I mean, it's a bit fiddly because you've got to basically interact with it on Discord, and I think that causes some people a discomfort because there's an additional thing you need to download. But essentially, you could just prompt it to do things, and it's quite funny. It's interesting to try and experiment with it. So yeah. There's I talk about list of tools being available and stuff like this, but the reality is a lot of the commercial everyday use products that we're going to use, we're starting to see GPTs integrated into those, and even if you did nothing, if we all sat, if for whatever reason you decided you didn't want to get involved in your own initiative, which by the way is your prerogative, that's totally something you might want to do. These things will start appearing into the software you use day to day. I'm on a Google universe, so I use Google Slides, Google's whatever. I'm seeing AI generated sort of prompts in those technologies now. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is how it's going to be. So even if we had a completely ambivalent attitude to it, you're going to get sort of some AI, whether you like it or not. Microsoft about to launch 365 Copilot, which is essentially an OpenAI integration into all of the Office suite, including Teams and including Outlook. So that will be, in my opinion, the super spreader event for AI, because immediately hundreds of millions of people worldwide will basically have an AI assistant on their apps, and it will make you better. It will basically help you, avoid having to learn, pivot tables and stuff. When you're wrestling away trying to format something on Word, which no one can ever properly, format that thing. Just talk to it. It'll say, hey, I want to format in 2 columns, please, not 3. Then it'll do it for you. So we're going to be AI enabled very, very shortly, because I think that is going to be a significant move in terms of how knowledge work it sort of operates when Microsoft switches that on.
I love that, Hung. I remember at the HR conference recently, the Recruiters Unite one, where you were the keynote speaker. It was wonderful to see you again in person here in Cape Town. But I remember afterwards you said that is going to be the last PowerPoint presentation that I do manually. AI is going to do my next one. So I thought, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah, no one likes doing slide design, right? How much time is wasted doing that BS? You could just like write your outline and pipe it into slides.io, whatever my Slides AI, I think it is the extension I use on Google, and it will just create you an outline of a slide deck that you could use. Obviously, you need to do some polish on it and do some edits or whatever, but it saves you a ton of time. So yeah, this is coming. It's kind of like we're already kind of halfway there. We're talking about diving into the ocean, but we're already kind of ankle deep at this point, No,
I love it. And Hung, I wanted to ask you, because I think you alluded to it already when we talked about generative AI, and you talked about compiling messages that were more personalized to people. Because I think there's nothing more off-putting, and I'm sure all of us have experienced it, when you get messages, whether it's on LinkedIn or email or anywhere, and you feel like, okay, this is just automated, and you respond and there's a little bit off automated response, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to engage with software here. I would like to engage with a human. So perhaps bearing that in mind, or anything else in mind, what would you discourage or tell people to be wary of as we're going into using AI more to help us be more successful?
I think you're absolutely right. We could overly automate and we could overly delegate some of the elements of recruitment work to the artificial intelligence. And we have to be a little bit careful about doing things en masse, basically. So there's 2 elements here. Firstly, using the AI to generate a customized message for one person is the first step. We're going to try and do that. I don't think there's any harm in that approach. But the next step is obviously, oh, great, I've got a database of 1,000 people. I want the AI to instruct the AI to personalize to 1,000 people, and off it goes. And that's where it becomes dangerous, because I wouldn't say dangerous, but you're going to run into situations where you'd be called out for just sending a mass message. And the truth is, Jane, the way I see this is that I do believe that the initial impact of generative AI on engagement rates will be that it will increase engagement rates, because basically your copy will get better, and people will respond more effectively. But then I think it will crash engagement rates as everyone does this, and we will learn to basically distrust anything in our inboxes. So in the same way that we distrust any unknown messages on our phone, unknown call, like when's the last time someone picked up an unknown call? If you recall, the last time you did that, I assure you that call really disappointed you because it was a salesperson or it was a robocall or something like that, and you're never going to answer an unknown call again. And I do believe that's basically what's going to happen to our inboxes. So we're going to get to a point. So engagement rates will go up, our spam will get better, basically. Then everyone gets overwhelmed by spam, and then inbox will basically ignore the inbox, and the response rates will crash. So I think that's the inevitable pattern for us. How do we get around this? And this is what I wrote about on Monday. We get around that by basically getting busy creating trust relationships with people who always receive our messages. So for instance, people who subscribe to the newsletter, for instance, I would hope that because that you trust what I'm going to do with that, that you would open that email. Or if I emailed you now, you might look at it and respond. The reason why that happens is because that trust relationship has been built. Now, I think the era of cold emailing anybody will basically migrate to the same place where cold calling is now. Where essentially the only people who are ever going to respond are the people who never get a message, like for whatever reason, they don't tend to get email or whatnot, or that's the only person that's going to respond. Anybody who has had any type of inundation will suddenly start ignoring that and be fearful of it. In the same way, an unknown call right now is anxiety driving, isn't it? If your phone rings and you look at it and it's an unknown number, it's like straight away, it's like, who the heck is this? How have they got my number? I think we're going to feel the same in our inbox. We're going to start like really distrusting it. So what recruiters have got to do is basically start building audience. We've got to start building trust relationships with people that we care about. So for instance, if you're hiring for nurses or whatever, you know what? You need to build trust relationships with those nurses, and you need to let them know that you're a human being that's trustworthy. And you need to work hard at that, so that they will be able to, so that when you do need to message them with something, they're more likely to respond because it's coming from a person they already trust. And I kind of say this, where basically AI is going to make you technically better, or AI-enabled messages will be technically better in terms of how they're written, objectively better even. They'll be just simply more readable. However, you compare that to the sort of messaging you have with friends, for instance. None of those messages are technically good. Look at your WhatsApp right now. I assure you the messages you're sending there, if you sent that to an unknown person, you'd be disappointed and ashamed at yourself. But the reason why you're totally comfortable sending technically bad messages is because you have a trust relationship. It doesn't matter. No one cares about the technical bit of it. No one's correcting your grammar. Your mates aren't correcting your grammar. They don't care you haven't put capitalization in there. They trust you and respond to you because of that trust relationship. Now, what we recruiters have got to do, I'm not saying you've got to make friends with all of the candidates that you kind of recruit with or for, but we need to do something similar to creating that level of trust, whereby they're more likely to accept our message, irrespective of the technicality of it, but because we've provided some value to them in some way, or we've not harmed them in some way previously. So yes, recruiters have basically got to start building trust relationships for the marketplace they cater for.
I love that, Hung. I think that's such a great point. And I think even in your article where you shared on Monday, as you referred to, you talked about the importance of consistency in building trust and how difficult that is, because people look for, do you show up the same person in person, on virtual platforms, on social media? Is there a golden thread? Are you who you say you are? But do I see you consistently? And I see so many messages around people who watch others on social media. And I've had people who seem to have waited for a year or more before they approach me for any kind of training or coaching. And I had no idea that they were watching. And sometimes it can feel like we're operating in this virtual space. And suddenly a message comes through and you think, wow, I didn't realize. So yeah, I thought those were some really good points. Yeah.
You'd be constantly surprised at that. Like I had a conversation earlier today, and this fella that I had this chat with, he actually like knew me from before even recruiting Brain Food. And he said, "Yeah, you did this," and I said, "Yeah, I did." And it got me thinking. Basically, and this is difficult, I think, for a lot of people because we don't naturally feel that we want to do this because social media has this sense that, you know, it's very performative, for instance. There's a lot of like status seeking going on. There's a lot of people trying to, you know, get approval, or even worse, you know, stimulate jealousy and stuff like this. And obviously none of us want to do this. Actually, I think particularly in South Africa, a lot of this is like culturally quite distasteful to do. You know, like in certain cultures very strongly disapprove of people who, you know, like to point the spotlight at themselves, so to speak. And I actually endorse that culture. You know, I think, you know, Chinese culture very much the same. And it's just simply being polite. But I'd like to reframe it in the sense that it's not so much about pointing the spotlight at yourself. It's more like just opening your front door, which again, you know, maybe it's a bad metaphor to use in certain circumstances. But it's to say, you know what, if you're operating in the open rather than being closed, you give people an opportunity to trust you. It's like you go to a modern restaurant. The reason why sort of the essay that I write on Monday is called Open Kitchen is because, you know, modern restaurants always have open kitchens. You know, there's a guy chopping food there. There's somebody at the fry station. You can see your meal being made. It's way back when that was hidden away. It's like all you got was the service and the food, and that was it. But the reason why the entire restaurant trade has moved to open kitchen is because it basically creates trust. It basically says, yeah, the kitchen's got nothing to hide. Please take a look at how your food is made. It's all happening right in front of you. And, you know, it becomes one of those things where they're operating in the open, and that gives us a sense of trust. And it says, yeah, you can trust the food here. It's actually been, I can see it being made. There's no microwave going on. You know, this is actually happening. And I think we can take that attitude to a lot of the work we do. And that sort of solves our conundrum about being a performer or not wanting to be a performer, because you're not performing, you're just doing your job. You just happen to have a window for other people to look in if they give a damn. And you don't give a damn if they don't give a damn, right?
Yeah, I mean, I must say, I think transparency and vulnerability builds trust. People want to see the imperfection. They want to know that you're human. I think that helps build trust. It's not off-putting. I mean, it depends what you're sharing, but I think you know what I mean.
That's true. There's limitations, right? But it is also sort of the only future we as humans have, I think, where we're going to end up basically paying a premium for the human served solution, and it will be imperfect. You know, very interesting to note that you know, when people examine the sort of jobs that are most resistant to AI disintermediation. So in other words, they're going to be the ones that are most proof against it. They're typically the high EQ type of jobs, where the human interaction is actually a key component of the service. And in fact, these are sort of services where we would require an imperfect human being in preference to a perfect robot. Because actually it's not just the outcome we want, it's the humanity is what we want. Yes. So nursing is a classic example here, where, you know, someone's not going to want a perfect android nurse. They're going to want a human being that's actually a living, breathing person that understands maybe what a living human being is like, understands what pain is all about, and can show some empathy. So I think that's the only direction that sort of human beings will end up occupying. Think about how that applies to recruiting and the elements of recruiting work that we do. The parts of the recruitment work that doesn't involve a lot of EQ probably will be firstly augmented by AI, then it will be automated by AI, and then it will be deprecated by AI. So in other words, it will be replaced. That element will be replaced. The part that won't be is that human aspect. So what I would say that people need to do is not just rely on. So the human aspect's great, but it's super inefficient. right? So let's say I do my job per week as a recruiter, and I have like, 100 interactions with human beings that I would describe as high EQ bits of work in that week. That's great. But there's 100 human beings that have been exposed to that. Can I make that into 10,000 human beings? Can more people understand where my EQ is? And that's where you need to have that open kitchen policy. Because if you're able to kind of just tell people or show people, or even as in the act of doing something, share that with your audience, you're basically sharing a bit of that EQ. And that's going to basically be a differentiator. And that, as you said right from the beginning of this particular segment, Jane, that's where the trust relationship will emerge. Because the flaws is something we resonate with. We resonate with imperfection much more than perfection. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of my areas, as you know, of absolute passion is interviews and connecting with people in a human way there, in a way that makes them feel valued and respected. And I always train hiring managers to think about, is that person walking away more courageous and feeling more valued than when they walked in, even if they're not successful for the role? But I do think of that as one of the pieces in the recruitment process where somebody wants to meet with a human. And I know practically people aren't meeting with humans in the beginning now in that process, but before somebody hires someone, they want to meet with the actual person. Although I have heard of situations where people have been hired without meeting a human at all.
Yeah,
I think you may have
100%.
even shared that at the conference.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right with that. We need the human touch, but I don't think we could be complacent with the idea that we'll always get that opportunity. So in other words, there's efficiency drivers which will mitigate against this. So what I'm not saying to people is that you should go and do like 100 interviews in person every week. That's not possible to do. That's a waste of time. What I'm saying is you should still have those interactions, but think about how those high EQ interactions can either be communicated to a broader audience, either after the fact or even during the fact. It's part of the reason why I know this is a recorded interview, which is what most people would like to do. But if I was doing it, I would live stream this out. And the reason why I would do that is because that basically takes care of content creation. So I'm not recording and then producing and then distributing. There's three things that's a 3-step process. Therefore, that's
thank
extra.
You,
well, no, that's what
you're doing. Have you
back
next month and stream it.
yeah, happy to do it. But the reason why, so that's 3 steps, which most people do. Today has just been podcast day, so that's the process I've gone through. So most people still do it this way. The reason why I don't is because I just basically don't have the time. So I'm like just live stream it out. So the content production, publication, and distribution happen at the same time. It's one act. And if we think about sort of that approach, that's where we can get much more efficient about scaling out our EQ, for instance. Because it means that we're not like thinking about content all the time. We're not thinking, oh, I need to write something or I need to produce something. Once you're in that like content production mode, it basically never going to happen because you're not a professional content person, you're a recruiter. So it's going to be extra work for you. You're not going to bother with it. We've got to find a way where we can kind of get that stuff out as we're doing work. Very similar actually to going to the gym. Hands up who goes to the gym here. And my hand is firmly down. I don't go to the gym. Why? I don't have the time, right? Literally that involves me getting changed, involves me like going to the gym, doing 1 hour of something, and then getting a shower, and then getting changed again, and then coming back and getting changed again. So that's like 3 hours worth of effort, waste of time. What I try to do is simply do stuff energetically. I mean, this is kind of ridiculous, but when I'm washing the dishes, believe you me, I'm aggressively attacking those dishes, right? I'm like energetically doing things in what my day to day. I run up the stairs, right? Why? Because I'm exercising. So what I'm trying to do is basically involve the exercise in my work, in my day, in my life, rather than have a segmented bit of my life where I'm saying, here's exercise. What I'm saying to everyone here is that we need to think about content, quote unquote, in the same way, because it's the only way to efficiently do it. It's not like let's carve out some special time to make content. It's like you're just working, you're calling people, you're searching people, you're doing whatever it is. Find a way in which that can just be like externalized. Can we externalize it in some way? That's the way to efficiently produce content consistently. And it's going to be more authentic because you've never edited, right? Literally, you've not done anything. It's out there. And it's going to be really compelling because it is actually stuff that people haven't seen. There'll be instances that occur in your day. In fact, there's maybe 4 hours left in your day. Let's say there's going to be an instance that happens today in the rest of your day that is a remarkable thing. That if other people kind of observe that or saw that, or in some way, were able to access that, they'll think, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that about recruiting. Oh, I didn't know that about this particular element of whatever it might be." So I think that's generally the way to try and think about scaling out what you do and operating and building in public, and these are all trust building techniques basically. And yeah, I think that's going to help engagement down the line, so to speak.
No, I love that, Hung, and I'm the same. I don't go to the gym for exactly the same reason, but I will go swim in the cold sea because the way there and the way back definitely gives benefit, because we're in a car of people and we laugh all the way there and then we laugh all the way back. So there's benefit in the travel as well as the activity.